It was one of those days that felt like everything was running in slow motion. I don't know why, but that afternoon, I started thinking about Emily. Maybe it was because I felt like we were slipping further apart, and I had just gotten into this rut of work, home, bed, repeat. I kept telling myself I needed to do something, anything, to break the monotony. It wasn't that I didn't care about her anymore. Far from it. I loved her. Hell, I still do, even after everything. But it had been so long since we'd done something spontaneous, something that reminded us of why we'd gotten together in the first place. So, I thought, why not surprise her today? Maybe show her that, despite the routine, I still wanted to be us. I thought about it for a while. Maybe a bouquet of flowers, something simple yet thoughtful. Or maybe I could take her to that little cafe down the street, the one she always went to on Wednesdays. The place with the old wooden tables and the smell of coffee and pastries that always seemed to make everything better. I remembered how her face would light up when I showed up unannounced. It had been too long since I'd seen that smile. I pictured it. I pictured the two of us sitting there, her laughing at something I said, her eyes soft with affection. I could already feel the warmth of that moment, a quiet lunch break in the middle of the day. Something to remind us both of the good parts. But as I pulled into the parking lot of the cafe, I felt something shift. It was subtle, like a weight on my chest that I couldn't explain. I tried to shake it off. Just me being paranoid, right? Emily would be thrilled. This wasn't some grand gesture, but it was a little something to bring us back together. I wasn't going to overthink it. But as I stepped out of the car and walked toward the entrance, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It was like a buzzing in my ear, something faint, but there. When I pushed open the door, I immediately saw her. Emily, sitting at the usual corner table, wearing her signature red scarf. But then I saw him. A man sitting across from her. A man too close, laughing like they were in some kind of inside joke. I stood there for a moment, frozen. My stomach twisted, and I felt my pulse race. There it was again. That feeling. That gut feeling that something wasn't right. I told myself it was nothing. Just a colleague, maybe? Or maybe someone she'd met there by coincidence. But the way they were sitting, the way she was leaning in, the way she was laughing, it didn't feel like nothing. It felt like everything had just shifted, like I had walked into some other world where I didn't belong anymore. I stood there for a few more seconds, trying to calm myself down. But the truth was starting to hit me like a ton of bricks. There was something happening here, something I wasn't prepared to face. So, I did the only thing that felt right in the moment. I pulled out my phone and dialed Emily's number. I didn't even think about it. It was automatic. I watched her phone light up on the table. Her eyes flicked to it, then to the man sitting across from her. There was a brief moment, just a flicker, where her expression faltered. But then she picked it up. And that was when the knot in my chest tightened. "Hey babe," she said, voice too bright, too tight. "What's up?" I kept my voice steady, though every word felt like it was coming out of someone else's mouth. "Just wanted to hear your voice. Where are you? At the office?" There was a long pause, just a beat, and then she spoke. "Big meeting, you know. Lots of things going on." Her voice was thin, almost defensive. I felt a rush of heat flood my face. "That's funny, Emily. Because I'm looking at you right now." Her face went white. I saw it in her eyes. It was like the life drained out of her for a second. The guilt was written all over her face. I didn't give her a chance to answer. I dialed again, watching her stiffen as her phone rang for the second time. This time, she answered. "Hey babe," she said, her tone cracking just slightly. "Where are you?" I said again, this time keeping the anger in check. "You said you were at a meeting." Her voice faltered. "It's nothing, Samuel. Just a quick break." I couldn't help it. I snapped. "It's not nothing. What's going on, Emily?" She froze. For a second, the woman who had been my whole world looked completely lost. And that was when I knew. It wasn't just a meeting. It wasn't just a coffee break. Something was going on, something more. And now, I was here, standing on the edge of something I wasn't ready to face. Something I couldn't deny anymore. I didn't wait for her to respond. My feet moved before my brain could catch up, and I walked right toward their table. The whole cafe seemed to hold its breath. The moment I stepped forward, Emily's eyes locked onto mine. I saw that same panic in them, the kind that comes when you're caught red-handed. She tried to force a smile, but it was shaky, half-hearted. Her laugh with him earlier still echoed in my ears, like a mocking reminder of everything I wasn't. The guy sitting across from her? He stood up too, looking like he didn't know whether to make a run for it or try to act like everything was fine. But that wasn't happening. Not today. Not with me. I didn't even glance at him. My focus was all on Emily. I needed answers. I needed her to look me in the eye and tell me this wasn't what it looked like. But deep down I knew. "So, who is this?" I asked, my voice low and steady, but sharp enough to cut through the hum of the cafe. It wasn't a question. It was a demand. Emily's face flushed a deep red, but she didn't answer right away. I could see her heart racing in her chest, her mind probably scrambling for a lie that wouldn't fall apart the moment she opened her mouth. She finally turned her gaze to the man sitting across from her, and for a split second, it was like she was looking for permission. The guy. He looked uncomfortable as hell. His hands twitched at his sides, and he glanced nervously at the door. His suit jacket looked too stiff, too neat for someone who was about to get dragged into a mess like this. He wasn't the kind of guy I'd ever picture with Emily. She'd always told me she liked real men. Men who didn't look like they spent their mornings picking out the right tie. But this guy, he was all polished edges and shiny shoes, the kind who probably practiced his smile in the mirror. When Emily didn't answer fast enough, I stepped closer, the anger in my chest starting to rise. "Who is he, Emily?" I repeated, my voice louder now. "This is what, some kind of work meeting? You're meeting with him in the middle of the day?" She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I could see her panic in full force now. She was cornered. "He's just a co-worker," Emily stammered. "We're just going over some ideas for a client pitch. That's all." "You're overreacting." It was the same line she always used when things were about to go south. "You're overreacting, Samuel." It's like she thought if she said it enough, it would make whatever was happening in front of me less real, less painful. I clenched my fists at my sides. "Really? A co-worker? In a cafe? On a Wednesday afternoon?" My voice was rising now. People were starting to look, and I didn't care. "You're gonna sit there and tell me there's nothing going on? Because I'm not buying it." I felt like my heart was about to explode in my chest. Everything was unraveling, and I couldn't get a hold of it. The guy tried to step in, his voice soft, too calm, like he was trying to defuse a situation that was already way past the point of saving. "Listen, man, it's not what you think." But I didn't let him finish. I turned my gaze to him, and for a second, I saw something in his eyes. Fear. Real fear. He realized he wasn't dealing with a guy who was going to sit down and talk things through. "Don't talk," I cut him off, my voice dripping with venom. "You don't get to talk. You're the one sleeping with my wife, not me. So why don't you just keep quiet and leave?" The guy looked at Emily, his face twisted with guilt, but all he said was, "I'm sorry, man. I really am." It wasn't enough. Nothing was enough. Emily didn't even try to stop him when he got up, hands held up in surrender. The man bolted for the door, moving faster than I'd ever seen a person move in my life. It was like he couldn't get out of there fast enough. I stood there, my mind a blur of anger and disbelief, just watching him go. Once the door shut behind him, the room seemed to exhale. But nothing changed. The tension in the air was suffocating. And then Emily, she crossed her arms over her chest, looking at me with a mixture of frustration and defiance, like somehow I was the one in the wrong. "What's the big deal, Samuel?" she snapped, voice sharp. "You're making a scene. It's not like you think. We're just friends. That's all." "Just friends?" I repeated, taking a step toward her. "Is that what this is, Emily? You really expect me to believe that?" I wasn't yelling, but it didn't need to be loud to hit hard. "I saw you. The way you were laughing, the way he was sitting so close to you. I know when something's off. You know when something's off. Don't insult me by pretending this is just innocent." Her face flushed again, but this time it wasn't embarrassment. It was something else. Anger, maybe, or guilt. But she wasn't sorry. That much was obvious. Instead, she leaned back in her chair and shot me a look that was almost annoyed. "You always overreact, Samuel," she said, like she was bored with the whole thing. "I didn't tell you because I knew you'd make a big deal out of nothing. It's really not that serious." I stood there, staring at her. The woman I thought I knew. The woman who swore up and down she loved me. And now, she was telling me I was the problem? Because I had the nerve to care? I didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal itself, or the way she just brushed me off like I was being unreasonable. "Nothing serious, huh?" I muttered under my breath. But she didn't hear. She was already looking away, tapping her fingers on the table, like she had somewhere else to be. I was numb. More numb than I'd ever been. This wasn't how I pictured my life with her. But here we were, and I was starting to realize that everything I thought we had, was just one big lie. Without saying another word, I turned and walked out of the cafe. Emily didn't follow me. She didn't even try. And that, in itself, felt like the final blow. The silence between us was louder than any argument ever could be. And somehow, I knew things would never be the same again. Leaving the cafe was like ripping off a bandage. Quick but still painful. I didn't say a word to Emily, and she didn't try to stop me as I headed for the car. The silence between us was deafening, and when she finally got into the passenger seat, she slammed the door like it was my fault for catching her in the act. The air felt thick, suffocating, and I could feel my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. The drive home was tense. Neither of us spoke at first, but I could see her glancing at me out of the corner of her eye, like she was trying to gauge how much trouble she was in. Eventually, she broke the silence. "You overreacted," she said, her voice sharp but low. "You didn't have to embarrass me like that." I tightened my grip on the wheel, biting back the words I wanted to shout. "Embarrass you?" I finally managed, my voice cold. "You're sitting there with some guy, lying to my face, and you're worried about being embarrassed?" "It wasn't what it looked like," she snapped, crossing her arms defensively. "We were just having coffee, Samuel. You made it into something it wasn't." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "Really? Because from where I was standing, it looked like you were pretty comfortable with him. Laughing like he was the funniest guy on earth. Haven't seen you laugh like that with me in a long time." Her cheeks flushed, but she didn't back down. "You're twisting this into something it's not. He's just a co-worker." "Then why did you lie?" I shot back, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "Why did you tell me you were at the office when you were out with him? If it's so innocent, why hide it?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned to stare out the window, her lips pressed into a tight line. That silence spoke louder than anything she could have said. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "You're not even sorry, are you?" Her head whipped around, her eyes blazing. "Of course, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you felt the need to make a scene. I'm sorry you don't trust me enough to believe me when I tell you there's nothing going on." "Trust you?" I scoffed. "You lied to my face, Emily. How am I supposed to trust you when you can't even admit what you did?" "I didn't do anything," she shouted, throwing her hands up in frustration. "You're acting like I cheated on you, and that's not what this is." I slammed my hand on the steering wheel, the sound echoing in the confined space of the car. "Then what is it, Emily?" "Because I'm not stupid. I know what I saw." She didn't respond, and the rest of the drive was silent except for the hum of the engine. When we pulled into the driveway, she got out of the car without a word, slamming the door behind her. I stayed in the car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But I needed a minute to collect myself before I could face her again. I sat in the car for a while, trying to gather my thoughts. I had no idea what I was even supposed to feel. Anger? Betrayal? Confusion? It was all a whirlwind, and nothing felt real. How could she do this? After everything we'd been through, after all the years of being a team, how could she sit there with him like that? Laughing, touching, whatever it was. They looked way too comfortable for two people who weren't just co-workers. I don't know how long I stayed in the car, but eventually, I made myself get out. The house was quiet when I walked inside. Emily was already in the kitchen, her back turned to me as she fiddled with something on the counter, her movements slow, deliberate. She wasn't even trying to look like she cared. I didn't know where to start, so I just went with the first thing that came to my mind. "Do you love him?" Emily froze, her back stiffening for a second. Then she turned to face me, her expression blank, like she was trying to shut off her emotions. "What kind of question is that?" "It's a simple question," I said, my voice tight. "Do you love him? Because if you do, just tell me. If it's that easy for you, if he's the one who makes you laugh and feel something, just say it." She looked at me, and for a second, I thought maybe she was going to break. But instead, she crossed her arms over her chest, like she was trying to protect herself from me. "No, Samuel. I don't love him. It's not like that." I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "Then what is it? What the hell is it? You don't just sit there with someone like that, laughing like you haven't seen me in weeks, and expect me to believe you when you say it's nothing." "I told you we're just friends," she said, her voice shaky now, but not from guilt. More like frustration, like she was trying to make me understand something I wasn't willing to accept. "We were talking about work, about projects. Nothing more." "Don't lie to me, Emily," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "I saw the way you were with him. And you're not fooling me with this, just friends nonsense." Her eyes narrowed. "You're so quick to jump to conclusions. You always do this. Jump straight to the worst possible scenario and make it worse. You know how I hate that." I couldn't help it. I felt my chest tighten, my blood start to boil. "I hate it too, Emily. I hate the fact that you feel the need to lie to me about everything." I paused, trying to catch my breath. "How many times have we done this dance? You hide something, I find out, and then I'm the one who looks like the bad guy for calling you out on it." She shook her head slowly, like I was the one who was losing it. "This is not about you being the bad guy, Samuel. This is about you not trusting me. Always thinking I'm doing something wrong, that I'm hiding things. Maybe you should take a long, hard look at yourself." That hit harder than anything she'd said all night. Because there it was. The deflection. She wasn't sorry, she wasn't even acknowledging what she had done. She was pissed that I had the nerve to question her, to doubt her. It wasn't about her actions, about the fact that she was sitting there with another man. No, it was all about me. I stood there, just staring at her, my hands trembling. "You don't get it, do you?" I said, the words coming out like a whisper, a sickening realization sinking in. "I'm not mad at you for making a mistake. People make mistakes. But this isn't just a mistake. This is a pattern. You've done this before, Emily, and every time you get caught, you act like it's my fault for not trusting you enough. For not believing that you're innocent. But you're not innocent." She didn't say anything to that. She just turned away, walking out of the kitchen like she was done with this conversation. I wanted to chase after her, to scream, to make her understand the hurt, the confusion I was feeling, but instead, I just stood there, helpless. I was done fighting for a marriage where I couldn't even trust my own wife anymore. The rest of the night was a blur. Emily stayed upstairs, in the bedroom. I stayed on the couch, the TV muted, just staring at the screen, too tired to even think. My head felt heavy, like it was full of concrete. My thoughts kept circling back to her, to what I saw in that cafe. And then, as if someone had flipped a switch, a cold clarity settled in. I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine when it was falling apart. And it was falling apart. Emily had made her choice, and I wasn't a part of it. The next day, I didn't know what to expect. Emily came downstairs in the morning, her eyes red, like she hadn't slept at all. I was already sitting at the kitchen table, the coffee in front of me cold. She didn't say anything, just stood in the doorway for a moment, looking like she was deciding whether to speak or just walk away. I couldn't stand the silence. "Are you going to keep lying to me?" I asked flatly. She sighed, shaking her head slowly. "I'm not lying to you. I told you, it wasn't like that. It was just, I don't know, Samuel. It's been a hard few months, okay? You're distant, and I was just trying to have a normal conversation. But you know what? You don't care. You never do. Stop, I snapped, standing up. You're not going to flip this on me. You're not going to make me the bad guy here. I paused, taking a deep breath, feeling like I might snap at any second. I don't even know who you are anymore, Emily. I don't know what this is. This isn't just a fight. This is everything. She didn't answer. She just stood there, her arms crossed over her chest like she was bracing herself for something. And in that moment I knew. I had to make a decision. Whether I walked away, or stayed and let her destroy me slowly. I think it's over, I said, the words heavier than anything I had said to her in years. I wasn't looking for a reaction. I wasn't even looking for a fight. I was just done. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me for a moment, then turned and walked back upstairs, not even bothering to look back. And that was it. I had made my choice. The days after that moment felt like a blur. I moved through them like I was in some kind of haze, like I was watching my life from the outside. Emily and I hardly spoke. The tension was thick between us, and every word felt like it would set the other person off. I could feel her trying to reach me, but it was like she was talking to a ghost, someone who had already checked out, even if my body was still here. I spent most of my time at work, which was a blessing and a curse. At least there, I didn't have to deal with her. But then I'd come home, and that silence would hit me all over again. I'd walk in, expecting to see her sitting on the couch, or hear the sound of the TV. But no, the house felt empty. Just her and me, two strangers passing by each other in our own home. On the fourth day after our confrontation, I finally gathered enough nerve to say something. Not because I thought it would fix anything, but because I knew if I didn't, I'd go insane. I found her sitting at the kitchen counter, her head down, scrolling through her phone. She didn't even hear me walk in. Emily, I said quietly, trying to keep my voice calm. She didn't look up. Yeah. Her tone was flat, like she couldn't care less. I hesitated. We need to talk. That caught her attention. She glanced up at me, her face still tired but guarded. What is there to talk about? You already made your decision. It's not like I can change your mind. The words hit me harder than I expected. It was like she was already giving up, like she had already accepted that this was the end. I don't know, Emily. Maybe I've been too stubborn, maybe I've been too angry, I said, leaning against the counter, trying to find the right words. But I need to know what this is. I need to know if it's worth saving. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she sat there, chewing on her lip, her eyes distant. Then, she finally looked up at me, and for the first time in days, I saw a hint of something in her eyes. Not guilt, not sorrow, just confusion. I don't know either, Samuel. I don't know where we go from here. That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't just about her affair, or the lies, or the broken trust. This was about us. All the years we had together, all the times we had promised we'd fight for each other. Now I was standing here, wondering if it was all just gone. I can't keep doing this, Emily, I said, my voice soft but steady. I can't keep living in a house where I don't feel like I'm a priority. I can't keep fighting for something that you don't seem to care about anymore. Her face faltered for a second, and she stood up, walking toward me. I do care, Samuel. I just don't know how to fix this. I don't even know where to start. I shook my head. You can't fix something that's already broken. I've tried, and I know you have too. But I'm not sure we're the same people we were when we started. Maybe we're just holding on to a memory. I saw the tears start to fill her eyes then, and for a moment, I wanted to take it all back. To pull her into my arms and tell her everything was going to be okay. But I knew it wasn't. The damage was done, and no amount of words could undo it. She wiped at her eyes quickly. What does that mean? Are you leaving me? I stared at her for a long moment. I don't know yet. I need space, Emily. I can't keep pretending like everything's fine when it's not. I need to figure out if this is something I can rebuild, or if it's better to walk away. For the first time in weeks, we were both silent. No arguments, no deflections. Just two people standing in the same room, facing the reality that we might not make it through this. That everything we'd built might just be over. I think I need the same, she said quietly, almost as if she was speaking to herself. I think we both need time to think. I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. Yeah, time. And that was it. I left the kitchen and went upstairs to the spare room. I didn't pack a bag, didn't make any big dramatic exits. I just left. Because I didn't know what else to do. I wasn't sure if I was coming back. Part of me wanted to, but the other part, the part that had been hurt too many times, that part was done. The bed in the spare room was uncomfortable, and the silence felt louder than anything I'd ever heard. But it gave me something I hadn't had in days. Peace. For the first time in months I could think clearly. And the truth was, I didn't have the answers yet. I didn't know if I could forgive her, or if I even wanted to. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just a fight. This was the end of something, whether we wanted to admit it or not. The hardest part? Knowing that maybe we'd already crossed a line we couldn't come back from. The days started to blur together. I went to work, came home, and spent my nights in the spare room, trying to find some peace in the silence. It was strange, almost surreal, living in a house with someone you once shared everything with, and now it felt like we were strangers. She was in her own world, and I was in mine. I could hear her moving around the house at times. Light footsteps in the hallway, the sound of her opening and closing doors. But there were no conversations anymore. No, how was your day? No good night before bed. It was just nothing. It was clear that we were both trying to avoid the inevitable conversation. Neither of us had brought up what came next. What would happen to the house, to our lives. It felt like we were both just waiting for the other person to make the first move. And maybe that was the problem all along. We had both been waiting for something, instead of really talking, really looking at what was happening between us. I spent most of my time at work, distracting myself with deadlines and emails. But there were moments, especially in the quiet of the evening, when the weight of everything would hit me all at once. I'd find myself sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the empty side, the sheets cold, and I'd feel this sick emptiness in my chest. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to fix this. But how? How do you fix something so broken? And then, one night, as I sat on the couch trying to watch some mindless show, she came down the stairs. She was dressed in a sweatshirt and leggings, like she was getting ready for bed. Her hair was pulled up loosely, and she had a tired look in her eyes. I wasn't sure if she was coming to talk or if she just needed to check on me. We hadn't really exchanged a word all day, and the tension was so thick I could hardly breathe when she entered the room. "Samuel," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. I didn't look up immediately. I wasn't sure I was ready for whatever was about to happen. But then she sat down next to me on the couch. For a few seconds, we both just sat there in silence. I could feel her presence beside me, but it didn't feel like it used to. There was a space between us now, a chasm neither of us knew how to cross. Finally, she spoke again. "I'm sorry." I turned to look at her. She wasn't crying, but her eyes were heavy with something. Regret, maybe. Or was it resignation? "Sorry doesn't fix this, Emily," I said quietly. My voice felt hoarse, like I hadn't used it in weeks. "I know," she whispered, wiping her hands on her jeans nervously. "I know. But I need you to understand. I didn't want this. I didn't want to hurt you." "You didn't mean to? Or you didn't want to get caught?" I asked, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice, but it was hard. She winced at the sharpness of my words. "I didn't want to hurt you," she repeated, her voice firmer now, like she was trying to convince herself more than me. "But I've been lost for a while. I didn't know how to tell you." "Tell me what?" I asked, my voice rising without me meaning to. "That you're unhappy? That we're broken? Because that's the reality, Emily. This, whatever this is, it's over. I don't know how to keep pretending it's not." Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time, I saw something other than deflection in her eyes. "I don't want it to be over, Samuel. I swear I don't. But I've been feeling so empty, and I didn't know how to fix it." So when he started paying attention to me, she stopped, her voice breaking slightly. I felt seen, you know? Like I mattered. I felt something snap inside me. So that's it? You'd rather run to someone else instead of talking to your husband? My chest tightened with anger, but there was a part of me that also felt defeated. Because maybe she was right. Maybe we had been drifting apart for so long that she couldn't see any other way out. I don't know how we got here, she whispered, tears finally welling up in her eyes. I don't know how we lost ourselves. I love you, Samuel. I do. But I don't know how to love you the way you need me to anymore. That hit me harder than anything she had said. And now? Now you want me to fix it? After everything? After I caught you with him? After you lied to me, over and over? I don't expect you to fix it, she said, wiping at her eyes. I just wanted you to know how sorry I am. For everything. We sat there in the quiet for a long time, neither of us knowing what to say next. I wanted to scream at her, tell her she was selfish for doing this to us, for breaking something that wasn't just hers to break. But I also felt the pain of it all, and I didn't know if I was angry at her or at myself for letting us get to this point. Finally, I stood up, taking a step away from her. I don't know if I can do this anymore, Emily. I don't know if I can keep living like this. Her face crumpled, like she was finally seeing the reality of it. The finality of it. Please, don't leave. I need you. I need us. But the words didn't mean the same anymore. The weight of everything was too heavy. I couldn't hold us both up anymore. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had to make a choice. A choice for me. I don't know what's left to save, I said, the words leaving me like they were tearing me apart. But I need space, Emily. I need time. I don't know what the future looks like anymore, but I can't keep pretending things are fine. Not when they're not. She nodded, silent tears streaming down her face. Okay. I understand. And just like that, the conversation ended. No resolution. No answers. Just the weight of everything we'd lost, sitting between us like a wall that neither of us knew how to tear down. I left the living room, not sure where to go, but I knew I couldn't stay here, not with everything hanging in the air. Not with her still sitting on that couch, looking like she was waiting for me to change my mind. And maybe I would. But not today. Today I was done pretending. The next few days were like living in a fog. Emily and I barely spoke, just short, clipped exchanges when necessary. There was no comfort in the house anymore, no easy conversations, no warmth in the small moments we used to share. It felt like we were both walking on eggshells, avoiding the inevitable. The fact that we were drifting further apart with every passing minute. I stayed mostly in the spare room, trying to give us both space, but the silence was unbearable. Even though she was just down the hallway, it felt like she was a world away. I couldn't escape the nagging thought that this wasn't how things were supposed to be. We had a family, a history. This wasn't supposed to be the end, right? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized we'd been living in this quiet crisis for so long. I had just been too stubborn to see it. I'd ignored the cracks, the little things that were off, the distance that had crept in between us over the years. It wasn't just the affair. It wasn't just Elliot. It was everything. The way we'd stopped talking, stopped connecting. She had checked out long before I even noticed. And now here we were, sitting in the ruins of something that used to be so full of life. I kept thinking about what Emily said. I don't know how to love you the way you need me to anymore. She was right. I didn't even know how to love her anymore. I didn't know if I was angry at her for what she'd done, or if I was angry at myself for letting it get this far. It was late on the fourth night when I decided to leave. I'd been going back and forth in my mind for hours, torn between staying and trying to fix things, or walking away before things got worse. But I knew, deep down, that staying in this silence wasn't doing anyone any favors. Not her. Not me. Not even the kids, though they didn't fully understand yet. I'd already packed a bag, a small one, just enough to get me through a few days. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed space. More space than this house could give me. I grabbed my keys, walked downstairs, and paused in the living room. I glanced at the door to the kitchen, where Emily usually sat, and the old familiar ache in my chest flared up. I stood there for a moment, letting the weight of it all settle over me. But then I heard her footsteps from behind me. She was coming down the stairs, probably just getting ready for bed. We hadn't exchanged more than a few words since that night on the couch, but I knew this was coming. I couldn't leave without saying something, without facing her, one last time. I turned around to find her standing in the doorway, looking hesitant, like she wasn't sure if she should speak or stay quiet. I didn't know how to break the silence between us, but she did. "Where are you going?" Her voice was soft, almost fragile, like she wasn't sure if she had the right to ask. I didn't want to lie. "I need some time. Some space." She nodded slowly, like she understood but didn't want to. I thought we could fix this. I thought maybe we could still work through it. That maybe you'd forgive me." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of her words. "I don't know, Emily. I don't know if I can forgive you. And I don't know if we can fix this. I've been thinking about it, and maybe it's better if we don't." Her face crumpled in pain, but she didn't stop me. She didn't beg me to stay. Instead, she just stood there, silent tears streaking down her face, her arms hanging limply at her sides. "Are you leaving for good?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know the answer. I didn't know what the future held, what tomorrow would bring, or if I'd come back. I had no idea how this would end. But I couldn't stay and keep pretending. Not with the way things had been between us. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I need time, Emily. Time to think. Time to figure out what comes next. For me, for us." She nodded again, but this time, she didn't say anything else. There was nothing left to say. The space between us felt infinite now, more so than ever before. I walked toward the door, and as I turned the handle, I felt her eyes on me. I didn't look back. The drive was the hardest part. I had no destination in mind, just drove, letting the road guide me. The city lights blurred past me as I drove aimlessly, not knowing where to go or what to do. I couldn't stop thinking about what I was leaving behind. The house. The memories. The life I had built with Emily. I kept hearing her voice in my head, asking me to forgive her, telling me how sorry she was. But the truth was, it wasn't just about forgiveness anymore. It was about whether I could even look at her the same way again. Could I trust her? Could I trust us? I ended up at a small motel on the edge of town. It wasn't much, just a room with a bed and a TV, but it was quiet. No distractions. No noise. It was just me and my thoughts, and for once that felt like enough. I lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the last few years. Thinking about how much I had loved Emily, how much I had tried to make this work, even when it felt like we were falling apart. But sometimes, no matter how hard you try, the pieces just don't fit anymore. I don't know how long I lay there before I finally closed my eyes, but when I woke up, I felt different. Not better, not fixed, just different. There was no magic moment where everything suddenly made sense. No grand epiphany. But I knew one thing for sure. The old life I had with Emily, the way I had seen our future together, was gone. And I didn't know if I could go back to it. The next few days were a blur of silence, reflection, and a strange sort of numbness that had settled deep inside me. I woke up each morning in that small motel room, staring at the ceiling, trying to find the strength to face the reality of what I had done, what we had done. I didn't go back to the house. I didn't know if I was even ready to face Emily again. I wasn't sure what I wanted, or what I needed. I spent my days taking long walks, trying to clear my head. The city wasn't the same without her. I'd walk past parks where we used to spend lazy afternoons, down streets where we'd stop for coffee on rainy mornings. Every corner held a memory of her, of us, and it all felt like a distant dream now. A dream that had shattered when I walked out of that door. But with the passing days, a small voice inside me began to stir. A voice that told me I couldn't keep running forever. I couldn't keep hiding from the truth. It was time to face it. To face her. I don't know why, but on the 5th day, I decided to go back. Maybe it was because I couldn't escape the reality of what was left of my life. Maybe it was because I knew I couldn't keep avoiding the inevitable. I had to make a choice, once and for all. When I walked through the front door of the house, everything felt wrong. The silence hit me first, and then the emptiness. The kitchen, once filled with laughter and conversation, was still. The living room, where we had sat and watched movies together for years, was cold and unfamiliar. There was no warmth here anymore, no life. Just the remnants of a love that had faded away. Emily was sitting in the living room when I walked in, her eyes red from crying, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She was wrapped in a blanket, like she was trying to hold on to something. I could feel her eyes on me as I stepped inside, but neither of us spoke at first. "Samuel," she said finally, her voice raw. "I wasn't sure you'd come back. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what to say either. I didn't know how to fix this, how to make it right." And in that moment, I realized I wasn't even sure I wanted to. The space between us had grown so wide, so deep, that I wasn't sure how we could ever bridge it again. "Emily," I said softly, my voice catching in my throat. "I don't know what to say. I don't know what we're supposed to do now." She wiped her eyes, trying to keep herself together, but I could see the pain in her face. The regret. The hurt. She had already apologized 1,000 times, but it didn't change anything. It didn't change what had happened, what she had done. "I'm so sorry, Samuel. I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she said, her voice trembling. "I never meant to hurt you. I thought I could fix things before it went too far. I thought I could figure it out before I lost you." I shook my head slowly. "But you did lose me, Emily. You lost me the moment you lied to me. The moment you chose him over me." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and final. There was no taking them back, no pretending they didn't hurt. Because they did. They hurt me, and I knew they hurt her too. "I don't know how to fix this," I continued, my voice breaking. "I don't know if I even can. I don't know if I can keep living like this. Not with you." Her face crumpled at my words, but there was nothing she could say. She had known, deep down, that this was where we were headed. And I had known it too, but I had tried to deny it for so long. "I can't keep pretending," I whispered, more to myself than to her. "I can't keep pretending like everything's fine when it's not." I could see the tears welling up in her eyes again. "So, is this it?" she asked softly, her voice breaking. "Are we done?" I didn't know how to answer. I wanted to say no, that we could work through it, that we could fix this. But I knew the truth. The damage was done. We had both let it go too far, and there was no going back. "I don't know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know anymore, Emily. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. What you want me to do." She nodded slowly, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "I get it. I've lost you. I've lost everything." And that was it. The moment everything shifted. No more words needed to be spoken. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. I felt like we had reached the end of something, not just our marriage, but the end of a chapter in my life that I couldn't get back. I stayed in the living room for a while, both of us too afraid to move, too afraid to say what we both knew. When I finally left, I didn't look back. I knew I had to leave, to step away, because no matter how much I loved her, sometimes love wasn't enough to fix what had been broken. I didn't know where I was going after I left, but it didn't matter. I couldn't stay in that house, not with all the memories of what we once were. I had to find my own way forward, even if I didn't know what that looked like yet. And maybe, just maybe, that was the hardest part of all. Letting go. Walking away. Knowing that something I had once held so dear would never be the same again. As I stepped out into the night, I didn't know what the future held. But I knew one thing for sure. I had to keep moving forward. I had to let go of the past and find a new path. And maybe one day, I'd look back and understand that walking away wasn't the end of the world. It was the beginning of something new. But for now, it was enough to just walk away. Thank you for watching this video to the end. What did you like most about this story? Write your answers in the comments. See you in the next video.